For decades, they were the undisputed kings of country music, Alan Jackson and Toby Keith. Their careers ran side by side, and their songs defined an era. But behind the scenes, rumors of a silent rivalry always seemed to simmer. They were giants, walking the same ground, two titans of a genre who might as well have existed in different universes. Jackson was the quiet traditionalist, the man in the white hat who wrote songs that felt like old photographs. Keith was the brash patriot, the larger-than-life showman who was never afraid to kick up a little dust. Fans have wondered for years, what was the real story? Was there a quiet Cold War between two of the biggest male stars of their time? Or was there a deeper connection, a mutual respect hidden away from the flashing cameras and roaring crowds? For years, the silence on the topic was deafening. But now, at 66, in the wake of Toby Keith's tragic passing, Alan Jackson has finally broken that silence. And the words he shared gave the country world the answer it was waiting for, revealing a truth far more complex and human than any rumor could ever capture. This is the story of what he said, what it meant, and why it changes everything we thought we knew about these two legends. To really get the weight of Alan Jackson's words, you have to go back to the 1990s. Country music was going through a massive change. The genre was exploding, bursting out of its traditional strongholds and onto the national stage. And at the head of that charge were two men who, on the surface, couldn't have been more different. First, you had Alan Jackson. Coming out of Noonan, Georgia, Jackson moved to Nashville with a dream and a stack of songs that were country. He signed with Arista Records in 1989 and quickly became the standard-bearer for the neo-traditionalist movement. His music, with hits like Here in the Real World, Chattahoochee, and Don't Rock the Jukebox, was a throwback to the classic sounds of his heroes, George Jones and Hank Williams. Jackson's whole persona was one of quiet dignity. He was a songwriter's songwriter, a guy who seemed more comfortable with a guitar in his hands than a microphone. He spoke to the heart of blue-collar America, writing about love, loss, and the simple joys of an unpretentious life. To his fans, he was the genre's conscience, a steady hand guiding country music back to its roots. Then there was Toby Keith. The Oklahoman burst onto the scene with a completely different energy. He was a former semi-pro football player and oil field worker, and his music had that same rugged blue-collar grit, but with a swagger and a smirk that was all his own. His debut single, Should Have Been a Cowboy, was a runaway hit, an anthem for anyone with a restless spirit. Keith was a showman. He was loud, proud, and fiercely independent. He wrote songs for the barroom, for the tailgate, and for the soldier overseas. He wasn't just singing country music, he was living it out loud, creating a brand of country that was muscular, defiant, and unapologetically patriotic. Throughout the 90s and into the 2000s, their careers were like two mighty rivers flowing in the same direction, but in separate channels. They both dominated the charts, sold out arenas, and collected armfuls of awards. They were often up for the same trophies, their names forever linked on the CMA and ACM ballots, and yet they rarely collaborated. They almost never toured together. They became the two poles of the country music world: Jackson, the quiet traditionalist, and Keith, the boisterous patriot. This separation, this seemingly deliberate distance, is where the rumors started to grow. In an industry as small as Nashville, when two of its biggest stars don't seem to be friends, people talk. Was it professional jealousy? A clash of personalities? Or was it a genuine dislike simmering just beneath the surface? The rivalry narrative was easy to believe because they represented two competing ideas of what country music could be. Jackson stood for the sacred past, a commitment to timeless stories and sounds. Keith represented a bombastic future, a willingness to be loud, controversial, and commercially huge. In a way, fans had to pick a side. Were you a Jackson fan or a Keith fan? The idea that you could be both just seemed like a contradiction to some, and for years neither man did much to shut down that idea of a quiet, professional friction. They let their music do the talking, and their music spoke two very different languages. But the loudest moment in their rumored rivalry wouldn't come from a song. It would come from a single, televised moment that got the entire country music world talking. The date was May 21, 2003. The place was the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, for the 38th Annual Academy of Country Music Awards. The tension in the arena was thick, and not just from the usual awards night nerves. A cultural firestorm had been raging for months. The United States was in the early stages of the Iraq War, and the country music scene had turned into a political battleground. On one side was Toby Keith. After the September 11th attacks, he'd released courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, the Angry American, a song that became a defiant anthem for a nation in pain. It was raw, aggressive, and wildly popular, turning Keith from a country star into a national symbol of post-9/11's patriotism. But it was also incredibly controversial. On the other side were the Chicks, who were then known as the Dixie Chicks. Just 2 months before the ACM's lead singer Natalie Maines had told a London crowd, "We're ashamed the President of the United States is from Texas." The backlash was immediate and brutal. Country radio blacklisted their music. Fans held public album burnings, and the trio even faced death threats. Keith jumped into the fray, feuding publicly with Maines. He started showing a doctored photo of her with Saddam Hussein on the big screens at his concerts, which only fueled the fire. And caught right in the middle of it all was Alan Jackson. His response to 9/11 was the complete opposite of Keith's. His song, Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning, was a quiet, reflective ballad that perfectly captured the confusion and heartache of that day. It was a song about unity and reflection, not anger. Jackson stood apart from the political shouting, a figure of quiet grace in a deeply divided world. That night at the ACMs, these three forces were on a collision course. The Chicks and Toby Keith were both nominated for the night's biggest award, Entertainer of the Year. So was Alan Jackson. Every time the Chicks' name was mentioned, a wave of loud boos rolled through the arena. The presenter, Vince Gill, even hesitated before reading their name, knowing the reaction it would get. The hostility was something you could feel. Then came the moment that would be replayed for years. As the nominees for Entertainer of the Year were read and the Chick's name was hit with another round of boos, the camera cut to Alan Jackson. He wasn't just sitting there stoically, he was laughing, wiping tears from his eyes. He was clearly amused by the sheer absurdity and tension of the moment. It was a brief, unguarded reaction, but given everything that was happening that night, it spoke volumes. Too many. Jackson's laughter looked like he was taking a side. Was he laughing at the Chick situation? Was he siding with the pro-war pro-Keith part of the audience? Or was he just laughing at the surreal spectacle of it all? At how a music awards show had turned into a political proxy war? When the winner was finally announced, the drama hit its peak. The award for Entertainer of the Year went to Toby Keith. The crowd roared. Keith, however, wasn't there to accept his trophy, so it was accepted for him. The symbolism was impossible to miss. The loudest, most defiant voice in the room had won. For anyone who bought into the Jackson-Keith rivalry theory, this night was all the proof they needed. Jackson's laughter, Keith's victory, it all fed the narrative of two stars who were clearly not on the same team. Jackson, the traditionalist, seemed quietly amused by the downfall of the genre's outspoken liberals, while Keith, the patriot, was crowned king. The incident solidified the perception of a deep divide, not just in country music, but between its two leading men. It seemed to confirm that their parallel paths weren't a coincidence, but the result of two very different worldviews, and, maybe, a personal coolness. For years after, this moment would stand as the defining public interaction or lack thereof between Alan Jackson and Toby Keith, leaving fans to fill in the blanks themselves. In the years after the drama of the 2003 ACMs, the story of a rivalry between Alan Jackson and Toby Keith seemed to set in stone not because of any open conflict, but because of how they continued to move in different directions. They remained titans of the genre, but they operated in completely separate orbits. Jackson kept releasing his brand of heartfelt, traditional country, cementing his legacy with songs that felt like instant classics. He was a constant, reliable presence, the anchor of modern country. Toby Keith, on the other hand, leaned into his larger-than-life persona. He built a business empire, with his I Love This bar and grill restaurant chain, and his own record label. His music stayed bold and often topical, and he never backed down from a fight or a flag-waving anthem. He was an entrepreneur, a brand, a force of nature, who became bigger than the music itself. Their public interactions were pretty much non-existent. They were rarely photographed together, never gave a joint interview, and never recorded a duet. This lack of connection just fueled the speculation. The Nashville world is a tight-knit community. Artists tour together, write together, and often become lifelong friends. The fact that Jackson and Keith to a close, the parallel paths of these two men were coming together again, not on an awards show stage, but on the shared ground of mortality and legacy. The world was watching them now, not as competitors, but as two beloved figures navigating the final chapters of their legendary careers. And it was in this new, somber context that the world would finally hear from Alan Jackson about how he truly felt about Toby Keith. The news of Toby Keith's death on February 5, 2024, after his courageous battle with stomach cancer, sent shockwaves through the country music world and beyond. Tributes poured in from artists all over the music spectrum, from Dolly Parton to Carrie Underwood to Morgan Wallen. They remembered his incredible talent, his huge personality, and his unwavering support for the military. But as the heartfelt messages flooded social media, one voice was missing, at least at first. The country music world held its breath, waiting. What would Alan Jackson say? For years, the narrative had been one of rivalry, of professional distance. In different styles, would his statement be a formal, polite, but detached message of condolence? Or would he just stay silent, letting the old rumors of a cool relationship be his final word on the matter? The answer, when it came, was simple, direct, and powerful enough to tear down 2 decades of speculation in just a few short words. On social media, alongside a classic photo of the two of them, Alan Jackson wrote, "Denise and I are saddened to hear about our friend Toby Keith. Our prayers are with Trisha and the entire Keith family. Signed, AJ. That one key word landed with the force of a revelation. Friend? It was a word that flew in the face of every rumor. It cut right through the rivalry narrative and pointed to a different, hidden truth. This wasn't a statement from one star about a colleague. It was a message from a man who had lost a friend. The message wasn't long or over the top, which was perfectly in character for the famously reserved Jackson, but its impact was huge. It suggested a relationship that was never lived in public, one based on a private, mutual respect that was deeper than their different public images. This simple, heartfelt tribute was later echoed in comments from those closer to the artists, painting a picture not of bad blood, but of a quiet, unspoken brotherhood. One report detailed Jackson's thoughts on their shared journey, noting that despite their different styles, they were both united by a deep love for real country music. He reportedly recalled that beneath Toby's tough exterior was a man with one of the biggest hearts in Nashville, someone who supported the troops, his community, and new artists without ever looking for credit. Jackson, now facing his own health fight, also spoke with a new, poignant perspective on Keith's battle with cancer. He acknowledged how fragile life is and the realization that their time as performers was limited. "We are getting older," Jackson reportedly reflected. "We are not those young guys running around stadiums anymore." Seeing Toby fight like that, it made me think about how fragile this all is. We don't get to do this forever. These words, full of emotion and a sense of shared mortality, gave us a rare glimpse behind the curtain. They painted a picture of two men who understood each other on a level that fans and the media could never see. They were both outsiders in their own way. Jackson, the quiet traditionalist in an increasingly pop-driven world, and Keith, the defiant outlaw who refused to play by Nashville's rules. They were, as Jackson is said to have put it, like dinosaurs holding the line against compromise. The most moving sentiments were the ones that spoke to the personal loss. "I miss him," Jackson confessed softly in one account, saying there's a comfort in knowing Toby was out there, doing things his way. He admitted that while they didn't talk every day, their conversations were meaningful, and that Keith was the kind of guy who'd show up when it counted. This was the final, definitive answer to the question that had lingered for 20 years. The rivalry, it turned out, was a myth, a narrative built from their different styles and a single, misunderstood laugh at an awards show. The reality was a bond forged in the fire of a shared, extraordinary life. They were two of the biggest stars of their generation, navigating the treacherous waters of fame, and in that, they found a quiet, unspoken kinship. At 66, facing his own farewell to the road, Alan Jackson wasn't just eulogizing a fellow star. He was honoring a friend, and in doing so, setting the record straight once and for all. He was closing a chapter, not just on Toby Keith's life, but on a piece of country music history they had written together, side by side, even when everyone thought they were worlds apart. The story of Alan Jackson and Toby Keith is a powerful reminder that there's often more to a story than what we see on the surface. Their legacies are forever intertwined, not just in the history of country music, but in the hearts of the fans who loved them. What are your favorite songs from these two country icons? Share your memories of Alan Jackson and Toby Keith in the comments below. We'd love to hear how their music has been a part of your life. And if you believe in the power of real country music and the stories behind the songs, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of your favorite artists. When you look back, the story of Alan Jackson and Toby Keith isn't about a rivalry at all, but about respect. It's proof that two people can be fundamentally different and still share a profound, unspoken bond. They were two sides of the same country coin. Jackson was the soul of country music, the quiet poet who could break your heart with a simple turn of phrase. Keith was the spirit of country music, the wild-hearted patriot who could make you raise your glass and sing at the top of your lungs. Alan Jackson's heartfelt words after Toby Keith's passing served as a final, gentle correction of the public record. By simply calling him a friend, he reframed their entire history, swapping the myth of animosity for the truth of camaraderie. His tribute showed that beneath the surface of fame, behind the awards and the platinum records, were two men who understood the weight of the crowns they wore. They saw in each other a fellow traveler on a long and often lonely road, as Alan Jackson now steps away from the touring life that defined his career for over 3 decades. His reflections on Toby Keith take on an even deeper meaning. His own battle with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease has given him a perspective on life and legacy that is both poignant and profound. In honoring Toby, he's also honoring an era time when country music was ruled by giants, when authenticity was king, and when the songs told the stories of real life. That laugh at the 2003 ZMS might be the moment that's forever stuck in the public memory, but it's clear now that it was just a footnote in a much longer, more meaningful story. It was a story of two legends who, in their own unique ways, fought to keep the soul of country music alive. One did it with a quiet reverence for tradition, the other with a defiant roar. The country world is richer for having had both, and thanks to Alan Jackson's final, heartfelt words, we now know that their parallel journeys weren't a sign of distance, but a silent, shared walk into music history.